We will start this webinar today, and just to let you know that the webinar is being recorded also. So I will start with a small introduction, and I would like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining the series of webinars on landscape restoration, starting with today. We would like to thank greatly UNEP and FAO for leading all the activities in the region. I would just start with quick housekeeping points for everyone to know. The interpretation is available for anyone needing Arabic translation. And you can see the small globe on the bottom of your screens. It has the English and Arabic interpretation available. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, please feel free to leave them in the chat box or the Q&A box. And we will have at the end of the webinar some time to take some questions. And if time does not allow, because we know it's a busy schedule for everyone, we will be answering and following up with all questions by email. Thank you very much. So I would just like to start with stating again the objective of the series of webinar is to initiate a discussion over ecological restoration in the MENA region and share acquired knowledge from the region and to establish a primary network of regional stakeholders. It is important, especially in those times and under the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, to work all together, scientists, practitioners, policymakers, communities, and others, to conserve our ecosystems for ecological, economic, and social purposes. I would like to first give the floor to Dr. Abdelmenem Mohammed, the Regional Coordinator for Science at the UN Environment Program West Asia Office, to give us a first word, if possible. Thank you very much. Dr. Abdelmenem, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karma. Assalamu alaikum جميعا. نحن نتكلم بالعربي, excuse me, I will speak in Arabic. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this event and welcome everyone who are joining us. يعني شكرا للجميع اللي شاركوا معنا اليوم, ونشكر جمعية التحريج في لبنان على الشراكة الفعالة في الواقع مع برنامج الأمم المتحدة للبيئة وكذلك الفاو. نحن طبعا في مكتب غرب آسيا بلبنان, المكتب الإقليمي للأمم المتحدة للبيئة, سعداء جدا بإطلاق عقد الأمم المتحدة لاستعادة النظم الإيكولوجية اللي يسموه UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. وطبعا نحن نشد على كل الفاعلين في مجال النظم الإيكولوجية أنهم ينضموا إلى هذا العقد وإلى هذه الحملة الواقع لحماية النظم الإيكولوجية في منطقتنا اللي تعاني الكثير طبعا من التحديات البيئية المختلفة. زي ما ذكرت الأستاذة كارما, طبعا حيكون في سلسلة من حلقات يعني جلسات النقاش أو الويبينارز المختلفة لتناول قضايا مختلفة خاصة بالنظم الإيكولوجية. ونحن سعداء اليوم بإطلاق أول هذه الحلقات أو هذه السلسلة للتعريف بموضوع هام جدا. لا أريد أن أطيل عليكم, أتمنى لكم يعني جلسة قيمة ونستفيد من آرائكم وتستفيدوا من هذه المعلومات, ونتطلع إلى حضور أكبر إن شاء الله في الشهر القادم. حتكون فيه هناك سلسلة كل شهر فيه ندوة عن موضوع مختلف خاص بالنظم الإيكولوجية. أكتفي بهذا القدر وأشكر كل المساهمين الفريق اللي قاموا بالتجهيز لهذه الندوة. شكرا كارما. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdelmenem. Now I would like to also introduce Dr. Abdelhamid Hamid, Senior Forestry Officer at FAO Regional Office for the Near East. Dr. Hamid, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Karma. Thank you, colleagues, and good morning, everybody. Very heartful greeting from Cairo to all of you. Well, I would like first to thank our counterpart, UNEP, for taking this initiative and for building the partnership with Lebanese Restoration Initiative to initiate this series of seminars. We will build on them. This will be just the start. With Larry, we will have different organizations coming in. We'll have different entities taking them on board. And as you know, within the decade, we are aiming at building very strong partnership with all restoration actors in the region, being them NGOs, being them civil society organization, academia, research, government institutions, because the decade is for all of us. Everybody has to have a stake on it. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve the ambitious goal of the UN decade of ecosystem restoration if we miss the contribution of every one single person in the region. That's a call for all of us and for a message that we have to put it across whenever we sit, whenever we talk about the decade, we should talk about it as a call for everybody in this region to contribute. Whatever small contribution you are making, it is going to be count. It will count. So that's it. And with this, I thank you again for starting the webinars, and we look forward to listen from you, the colleagues in Larry, and for the rest of the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamid. And what you and Dr. Abdelmenam also mentioned, this is a first step of a series of webinars that will be taking place. And the whole point of the webinars is to create this regional network and work hand in hand and start putting ideas forward and learn from each other, from the successes and the challenges that we have faced in different projects, different countries, different conditions. And today is just the start, and it will be a stepping stone for the future. So today's first webinar will target biodiversity assessment tools in ecological restoration planning. We thought that it would be a good first webinar to start with because our biodiversity is very important to conserve in our region, and it is a key for ecological restoration. So today, the importance of biodiversity assessment, including flora and fauna, will be discussed, and the use of non-invasive biodiversity assessment methods to support the development of best conservation and restoration plans. So my colleagues, Joël Salehme, the Nature Resources Conservation Specialist, and Samara P. El-Haddad, the Wildlife Conservation Specialist from Lebanon Reforestation Initiative, will be presenting some great tools for biodiversity assessment in the context of ecological restoration. So with great pleasure, please, Joël and Samara, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Karma. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in that webinar. So first of all, I'm going to present who we are. We are the Lebanon Reforestation Initiative. We are a Lebanese NGO registered at the Ministry of Interior and Municipalities since 2014. But we started as a project launched in the United States by the U.S. Forest Service, the IP International Program, and funded by the USAID. So mainly our vision is to sustain the forest landscape restoration and the management across Lebanon. So we aim mainly at conserving, expanding Lebanon's forest through a community-based approach and through the public and private partnership in Lebanon. Also, we are trying to empower communities and advocate to better manage the forest resources that are available in each community. In order to reach this mission, we have several programs under our NGO. We are working on the Integrated Landscape Management Program, the Climate Change Resilience Program, the Research and Development Program, an Environmental Education, Awareness and Capacity Development Program, and finally, an Environmental Advocacy and Lobbying Program. So I'm going to talk mainly about the Integrated Landscape Management Program, where we have several activities and several sites all over Lebanon. We are working actually in 214 towns, and we have managed so far around 3,600 hectares. We are working on reforestation, fire prevention activities, forest management activities, rangeland management, quarry restoration, agroforestry, rural tourism, urban forestry, and wildlife conservation. And we mainly, when we are talking about reforestation and agroforestry, here we are talking about, we have planted so far around 1.3 million trees and we have planted 72 species. Most of these species are native species. So now I'm going to talk about Lebanon's biodiversity. First of all, we all know what's biodiversity, and we all know why biodiversity is important. So biodiversity is important because it has an intrinsic value, which means that the value is independent of potential usefulness of biodiversity for human beings. So species and ecosystem have subjective intrinsic value, and we have a beneficial value. For example, biodiversity is providing food for us, it's providing cultural and economic value because, for example, we're using biodiversity spaces for recreational area. So forests, for example, are used for ecotourism, to develop ecotourism. Also, we are using the biodiversity to enhance our health. So we have a lot of medicinal use for the plants and as well the animals. We have a lot of, we use mainly the natural ecosystem to enhance our mental health. Also, biodiversity is used as a solution for climate change because we have, it helps in improving microclimates and climate adaptation. What is the status of the species worldwide? So worldwide, we are losing 3 species every hour, which means around 20,000 species a year. So, and whenever we're losing one species, it is leading to the loss of another species. I'm going to talk now about the flora in Lebanon. So first, the flora of Lebanon and Syria was assessed by a French botanist in the 1983, and the botanist have identified several species. His name was Paul Moutard. So currently in Lebanon, we have 2,612 species. Out of these species, we have 49 that are present in the whole Mediterranean region and the Middle East region. We have identified 119 new species that were not identified by Moutard, and we have lost around 80 species that Moutard identified previously, but we couldn't find them recently. All those species goes under 155 family of flowers and trees and shrubs as well. And we have 108 endemic species in Lebanon, which is a big number.
Hi everyone, so I'll be talking about the fauna in Lebanon. So in general, it was first studied in the 1960s to the 1980s, but it was very basic. The studies were based on presence and absence, nothing more than that, no population density, distribution, or anything. And since then till now, they've even realized quite a few animals have been going extinct. Some from the early 19th century, some more recently from the 80s. For example, the brown fish owl and the marbled polecat. Those are ones that were most recently extinct. And yeah.
Back to the flora. So we have a lot of endemic species in Lebanon. What does endemic mean? Endemic means that this species can only be found in Lebanon. It cannot be found in Syria. It cannot be found in Turkey. It cannot be found in Palestine because the climate and the environment is suitable only in Lebanon for that species. For example, we have the Allium libani that is endemic for Lebanon and Syria, but this species is classified as near threatened by the IUCN. We have another species that is endangered, which is the Iris sofarana caseruana, which is only found in 2 locations in Lebanon because it needs a special, kind of sandy soil to grow in it. So this species is classified as endangered by the IUCN and need a lot of protection. That's why, for example, in an area in Lebanon, in Ehmish, we have created like a micro reserve for this species to protect it. Also, we have another, for example, species that is endemic to Lebanon that is considered as vulnerable, the Astragalus angulosus.
Sorry guys, I'm going to take you back between flora and fauna. So a couple of the endemic species in Lebanon, I picked the top 3 that are all actually classified as endangered by IUCN. Now, the Lebanese pin-toed gecko is 100% only endemic to Lebanon, specifically Mount Hermon. But last year, another NGO actually found out this gecko is actually found in 2 other mountains in Lebanon. So more studies need to be known if they're just endemic to the country now and not just to a specific mountain. The Lebanese mountain viper and the Khuzur lizard is endemic to Lebanon and Syria only. And those are the top ones.
Also, we can find a lot of invasive species in Lebanon that sometimes we mistaken them and we consider them as native species because we can find them a lot in Lebanon. An invasive species is a species that grows faster than the native species in Lebanon because it has a suitable environment here. For example, we have the Malia that we can find on basically all our roads in Lebanon, as well as the Cinchona species. We can find them all over Lebanon, but these species are invasive and they are taking the place for the native species. So there is no space for the native species to grow.
For the fauna that are considered invasive species in Lebanon, some were introduced on purpose, but for different reasons. For example, the European rabbit was introduced back when France was ruling Lebanon as a new form of meat farming for people, but some people ended up releasing them because, well, they're too cute. And that's been doing a lot of damage to our agricultural lands, especially our native species, the Cape hare that we have in Lebanon. Some were introduced by accident. For example, the lionfish came through the Suez Canal, and it's been spotted in the past couple of years, destroying most of our coral reefs. The common myna as well, and the red-eared spider came through the illegal pet trade. People ended up releasing them into the environment, hoping that they're giving them their freedom. And we've realized, and we've starting to notice a lot of local species dying because of these animals. Stray and feral cats, it's a bit hard to take in Lebanon to consider them as invasive species, but there are thousands and thousands of cases every month of them attacking native fauna. So this is one of the issues with our biodiversity here.
Now I'm going to talk about the flora assessment methods that we have adopted at LRI. I'm going to share the vegetation map that we have developed. Just one second. So you can find this vegetation map on our website. So here we have developed this vegetation map based on the previous vegetation map in the 1988 that was developed by Abi Saleh and Safi. So in that map developed previously, we had several vegetation series, and in each vegetation series, we have a set of species. So what we have done, we've taken that vegetation map and we have created a fishnet, which is a grid done through ArcGIS all over Lebanon. Then we have identified some plots that is accessible and we can visit them. And we have seen in those plots 42. We were searching for 42 kind of trees and shrubs species that we were interested in locating them. So once we have seen in each plot which trees we have found, we have studied the ecological characteristics of each species. Then we have layered on ArcGIS the different ecological characteristics. I mean, the slope, the exposure of the whole Lebanon, and then we have been able to develop this map that can show us where we could possibly find those 42 trees and shrubs that we have studied. Also, we are working on what we call the index of potential biodiversity. So whenever we're going to the field, we are taking 1 hectare plot of a forest, for example, and we are trying to identify what are the tree species that are available in this area. Are there any invasive species? Do we have, for example, how many vegetation levels do we have? How many microhabitat we have on the trees? For example, if there is any, I don't know, any bird present, you know, the habitat of a bird, any bird is present on the tree. So by that, we could assess the carrying capacity of the forest. So we can know how many plants, how many birds, how many insects it can host, and we can identify the possible points for improvement if we want to do any silvicultural intervention.
Hi again, everyone. So right now we're going to introduce to you all the fauna assessments and projects LRI has been doing and contributing for ecological restoration. First of all, very briefly, because I'm sure everyone here today already knows the importance of fauna when you're doing flora restoration. You need fauna at the end of the day to continue the whole life cycle of everything. So human interference can stop at one point and you have a healthy ecosystem. Usually we will start tackling like keystone species or sometimes flagship species and so on and so forth. First, we had the few challenges in Lebanon. When we say there's no baseline or continuous monitoring, I did mention earlier that fauna research started in the 60s and 80s, but it kind of halted back then. And again, no species population, densities, geographic distribution, everything is unknown about that. There's no conservation projects being done for any of them. And, you know, it's completely disappeared since then. Also, some studies are being done maybe by universities through master's students and PhD students, but then these are not being published or having an open access to make sure that the information is not, the study is not being actually repeated by different organizations. So we have that issue. Also, there's two main issues happening. Is the laws. Lebanon actually has very strong laws for the hunting law, as well as the environmental protection law. But unfortunately, they're not being implemented properly across the country. And we're actually losing 1.6 million migratory birds per year. Like, that's one of the biggest stats I thought would be good to share today, because that's a huge number that we're losing over our country. But thankfully, we do have a lot of opportunities. At this day and age, technology has advanced very, very far, which will help assist filling all of these data gaps, and as well as citizen scientists to bring more the communities to understand and remove any misconception, which ends up helping in the science department. So some of the non-invasive techniques LRI has started using since 2020 is environmental DNA from water samples. We've taken quite a few water samples from different water bodies, an artificial lake, natural rivers, streams, to identify all the vertebrate species present, and it's based on present data, so the animals that were there up to 48 hours. Also, we're using footprint identification technique. There's an organization called WildTrack. They have been able to create an AI system that helps identify individuals' age and sex from the footprint, so that it really helps to do population assessments. Same goes for scat collection and camera traps, but mainly footprint identification and scat to do DNA analysis really helps us to fill in the gaps of population densities, distribution, and the genetics. Camera traps and eDNA help us to triple check that animals are present within the area. We're going to start with the environmental DNA. So we partnered with Nature Metrics. They have a service of using their kits internationally, and it's very, very, very cost effective. The data I'm showing you today is from 2020. We have some exciting data from 2021, but that's for another time to share what happened in 2020. When we did the assessment, we only did 20 samples from different diverse areas in Lebanon, and we got a lot of species detected from the vertebra kingdom. There were two very nice highlights, the fire salamander and the common pestrel. These are two very understudied species in Lebanon in general, so it was very nice that you could spot them through eDNA, which makes it more cost effective again to keep using this technique in other areas in Lebanon. Now, there were two very, very surprising ones that came up in this sample set, is the forest dormouse and the Eurasian green woodpecker. Now, to tell you about the forest dormouse, it was not part of the 60s and 80s studies. It was never discovered. It was always considered presence uncertain because Syria and Palestine actually had proven that this animal is present, and we technically have its habitat, but no one has ever spotted it. Then it got first spotted by a hunter in 2004. Was curious, why does this mouse look all fluffy? And then in 2011, a scientist made a very short study with Sherman traps in the same location that hunter found that mouse and proved that these species are found here. And again, the publication back then ended. So it was a great step for us to actually find that this animal is still existing within the area, which then came up to another ecological restoration project. We'll come to it. But now for the Eurasian green woodpecker. Lebanon is known to have only one species of woodpecker, which is the Syrian woodpecker. And the Eurasian green woodpecker is not a migrant species, and the closest country that it is native to is in Turkey. So there's a big question mark with this. Is it because woodpeckers weren't studied in Lebanon properly to know actually this species is found in Lebanon? Or did it come through the illegal wildlife trade through shipping? Because many times in Lebanon, when shipments come from Turkey or around the world, there is animals being smuggled through. So was this smuggled and released by accident and it's made its home in Ihden? So many questions, but this leads to more projects to actually study our wildlife. Now, I'm going to move on to one of the biggest projects that we have right now is the Eurasian otter conservation project in Lebanon. So otters are only found still in 2 areas in Lebanon. IUCN actually has labeled them as critically endangered species, so just one step away from extinction. Thankfully, they are keystone species for riparian habitats, umbrella species, and flagship species, which is very, very great. And since they control all the fish population, everything, this is very good for local livelihoods for them to, keep fishing. We've used many different techniques. One of them was the eDNA that I had previously showed you. One of the rivers that were supposed to still have otters, we actually found out they do not exist there anymore. But in the second river, they do still exist. We caught them in the camera trap and many different techniques, which I'll show you in a moment. But in this project, we're actually studying the genetic variability, how many individuals, how are they living across, habitat suitability, everything you can possibly think of. So we can actually be able to enhance our riparian habitat restoration for these species and the local livelihoods of all the communities across the river. So eDNA, as I mentioned, in the Ghazayel River, we proved that there's no more otters living there, but we have a theory that they're going down the Litani River down south. So that is going to be actually analyzed this summer. But in Nahr al-Kabir, the last 2 years, we have proven that they still exist there through eDNA, through camera trapping and sprains, and even the past few months when we started our field work, continuing the monitoring, they're still thriving and existing there. Also, we're monitoring them through their footprints, trying to cross-reference through the sprains and footprints how many population we have, because maybe we're not collecting a sprain of all the otters found there. So hopefully we catch their footprints to cross-reference who's who. As well, this is the AI system from WildTrack. Sprains. So far we have, I know on the slide says over 50, but we exactly have 86 sprains collected from the Nahr al-Kabir so far. That's a great target for us because we're aiming for 200 by October. So getting closer and closer for then. Now camera traps, the biggest beautiful discovery that we found through camera traps, because the sprains are still being analyzed, is actually, if you see on the top right corner, we found a mother and her 2 pups. So that proves, they are regenerating quite well. And we didn't only spot them, we spotted many different beautiful wildlife and diversity over there, from the Levant water frog, even the badger, we caught it just coming out of the river. You can see it's all fluffy and wet. And then there's the wild cat, which morphologically right now on this camera trap, it's proven that it is it. But Lebanon has a huge issue with invasive species, which are the feral cats. So genetically, we don't know yet if we still have pure wild cats or they're hybrids with our domestic cats. So spotting this on the camera trap helps us continue asking these questions to make, better projects in the future. The second project we're working on here at LRI is the bat project. So in Lebanon, before COVID even kicked in as a pandemic, there was a lot of misconceptions about the bats. But around the world, everyone already knows and are working on the ecosystem services bats provide us, from pest control to pollination, seed dispersal, all of that. So it was finally time to bring this to Lebanon, study our bats here in Lebanon, see what are the exact services they're providing us, to remove this misconception, but at the same time help the locals and farmers specifically have better quality of crops through the help of bats. This project happened last year. The data is still coming out on their diet to actually finalize the ecosystem services they provide us. But we've realized that there are a lot of places that were supposed to have bats and caves, but it's completely destroyed. Either people have used it as a dump site for their garbage, or on purpose have gone in and burnt the cave. And actually, we still have remains of shotguns they're trying to kill the bats. So we realize there's continuous monitoring needs to happen for all past bat roosts that are still known, and bat box initiatives should happen. And this is just a short, quick video of us taking the bat guano in the cave, my colleagues and myself, with the bats all around us. We took this video to actually show community members that even when we as scientists are going into these caves and we're just collecting these samples, we're not being attacked by bats, and bats are not harmful. So it's just like a small short video. Our final project that we're working on and started this year was thanks to the eDNA samples from 2020 when the forest dormouse was basically rediscovered that it's still existing. To do this non-invasively, we are using the footprint technique from WildTrack. And the way to do that, since they are very elusive animals and they spend 90% of their time in trees, we've created footprint tunnels, basically just 3 pieces of wood, 15 to 40 centimeters, attached to each other to make a triangle, left some charcoal and contact paper. So when they enter the tunnel from either ends of the tunnel, they get charcoal onto their paws and leave their footprints. And as you see, we actually even set up one camera trap near one of our tunnels. As you see at the bottom left, we caught the forest dormouse sniffing our tunnel. And on the right, the photo that's taken, that's the exact same contact paper from that moment in that camera trap. All of these small footprints is the forest dormouse, which now you'll be able to do population assessment within the hidden nature reserve, how many forest dormouse actually are living there. So, and from putting tunnels in different trees and in different parts and diversity of a hidden nature reserve, we can actually then know habitat suitability, or which trees and areas they prefer, more dense, more open, more, so far we already have noticed they prefer to be high on very higher trees, at least 3-4 meters high, also in very more dense vegetation than open vegetation. These are the initial results for now. But after in October, when we end and actually see all of this into the population assessment, we can do the national status, which then after all of that, the next stage would be studying their diet to see what forest regeneration assistance they do. So that would help us in all of the restoration projects we're doing. If they like more dense, we can start restoring more dense forest for them to then be able to regenerate the forest in the next generations. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Joelle and Samara. This was a perfect example of what a biodiversity assessment should include between fauna and flora. And let me tell you, I love the switch between Samara and Joelle when talking about fauna and flora, because it shows that this is a team effort. It should be a team effort, it should be a national effort, and it should be a regional effort to be able to reach more successes such as Joelle and Samara presented. And the key points of this presentation, I think, to really take into consideration is that how biodiversity assessment and accurate data and present data could improve ecological restoration practices in the region, and consequently, it will improve livelihoods of rural communities. And it's the way how our communities perceive that biodiversity that is also really important. And I like the fact also that we get to show our communities and all different stakeholders that biodiversity is important and there's nothing dangerous about any wildlife or flora. So thank you very much, Joelle and Samar, for this amazing presentation. And I know that we started a bit late, and please, if I will say it again, if anyone has questions or comments, either the chat box or the Q&A, please feel free. And we will have a few minutes at the end to answer some and follow up in emails if we do not have time. Unfortunately, we had one speaker that wasn't able to join us, and we wanted to share, again, those series of webinars is a way to just showcase everything that is happening in the region and the different fields of ecological restoration, and to include case studies in such webinars from around the region and different countries is very important for us. So also before we continue, I would like to ask everyone if they would like to share any case studies from their region, from their countries. Please also send us an email, either put it in the chat box now or an email later. We would be delighted to share as many case studies from around the region and as many countries as possible. Unfortunately, our next speaker, because of an intensive schedule, trust me, it is a very intensive schedule, Dr. Tariq Abu Talib from Jordan will not be able to give himself the case study from Jordan from a flora assessment. However, I will be giving briefly a small background about the flora biodiversity in Jordan. And also after this, I would like to discuss how a possible collaboration between Jordan and Lebanon on biodiversity assessment and results from Lebanon could be replicated in Jordan and in many other areas. So I will just share my screen just a bit with everyone for a moment. Okay, so I also have been lucky enough to work in Jordan since 2015, and it is one of the most amazing places with such plant diversity. You can see it has almost 2,531 vascular plant species. And the flora of Jordan represents Mediterranean, Irano-Turanian, Saharo-Arabian, and Sudanian climates. About 88% of Jordan is desert with less than 1% forested regions, however, still high in plant diversity. And this is an important thing to note in Jordan. And it is part of hotspots for medicinal plants, ornamentals, and other crops. A national initiative was created to develop the IUCN Red List of threatened species in Jordan. The Royal Botanical Garden has initiated this and this great initiative with the collaboration of different organizations in Jordan. Of course, such a publication will need national collaboration. And you can see here, it has 2 different volumes, and it covers all the plant red list in Jordan. Yes, okay. And also just to continue, the Jordanian National Plant Red List objectives is to contribute to the national conservation planning. Again, we cannot stress enough that an accurate assessment of flora and fauna is important for accurate conservation strategies and planning in the future. And it's important to identify those geographic areas and habitats needing to be conserved to prevent their extinction and to ensure that Jordanian vascular plants reach and maintain a favorable conservation status, and to identify the major threats to plant diversity in Jordan and propose mitigation measures and conservation actions and address them. Also to strengthen the network of national plant experts. And again, I think this publication was made with the effort of so many different organizations and experts, which is really important. And we don't want just a networking in each country on a country level, but on a regional level also. And to strengthen the relationship between national and international plant experts focused on conservation of vascular plants in Jordan and ensure activities are fully integrated. It brings a summary report on the status and distribution of Jordanian vascular plants, their main threats and recommendation for conservation measures. These are the main outputs of such a publication. It is it's a free available database holding all the needed baseline data for monitoring the status and distribution of Jordanian vascular plants. A website and data portal showcasing this data and the form of species fact sheets of all Jordan is also available. So, and here you can see the first annotated plant checklist for Jordan. This is just an amazing work and just, I think, the start of any kind of biodiversity assessment on a national scale and regional scale. And from those initiatives, there also are more collaborations between NGOs in Jordan and in Lebanon. Another example is a possible collaboration between LRI and the Wadi NGO in Jordan to actually start the piloting of eDNA in Jordan because of such promising results that we had in Lebanon. And this also showcases, again, the whole point of those webinars is to share our successes and challenges and see how activities can be replicated on the regional level. We started with the biodiversity assessment as a first webinar. However, we would like to continue in different aspects of ecological restoration, and we would like to hear from everyone their own case studies, so we will be able to share and reach out to you in the next few days or week also. I would like to thank our presenters very, very much, and also UNEP and FAO again. And I think now we will be able to open the floor for some questions and comments. We have a few minutes if everyone is okay with it. And there's one question from Lubna, and she's asking about any project on biodiversity assessment in the soil.
Hi, thank you for that question. We're actually going to start working on that as well with Nature Metrics. So their kits are not just for water, they have a soil version as well. And right now we're finalizing with them the methodologies of how to do the sampling, because with the water, we did it every other 2 to 3 kilometers of the river, or if it was an artificial lake, we just took one water sample. So the methodology technique is a bit different. So we're currently finalizing that with them. And then we're going to use these kits in restored sites that LRI has worked on from the past 10 years and some from the past 3 years. And then there's another patch of land that is still destroyed and no intervention has happened to it, that we're going to take them a soil sample from there as well and compare. But how many soil samples from each plot of land, we're finalizing that with them. And the next month, hopefully, we'll finalize it. And then throughout July to September, we'll start doing these sampling techniques for it to be analyzed to then see how well that works in the context and the diversity we have here in Lebanon. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samara. Lubna, I hope this answered your question. And if you have more comments or questions, please feel free also to type them. And thank you for replying. Thank you very much, Lubna, for this. I think I have one question for our presenters, if this is possible. We would like to, if you could share with us, why is biodiversity assessment? I know you have shared this also, but it would be nice to hear it from you, that why is biodiversity assessment so important for ecological restoration and nowadays also? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Karma. So basically, in order to do a good ecological restoration, you really need to understand the species that are available. I'm talking about floral and the fauna species that are available in a site, for example. So it's important to have like a baseline of what is available in the region. Also, for the floral biodiversity, it's important to understand, for example, in a site, what are, for example, what species are suitable with the pine tree, for example. So whenever we're doing any restoration, we're planting new pine trees, we could know what are the species that could go with that species. So that's it from my side. Samara, do you want to add something?
To add there as well is for after that step for the flora, there's the step for the fauna. Sooner or later, we need to stop the human intervention of restoration, right? We want nature to take its course to be able to restore and regenerate itself on the longer term. So for the longer term restoration, you need to have the fauna in, making sure they're providing their services properly and efficiently. That's why we don't need to only have presence and absence of the animal, because maybe, yeah, the animal's present now when we're doing the restoration, but they're actually genetically dying. They're not genetically unique anymore, or they're inbreeding. So on the longer term, we actually haven't done anything for restoration. We just did the first steps, but we didn't do the whole step for long term. It's always short-term thinking and never long-term thinking. So with these techniques that we're using, the non-invasive techniques, especially eDNA, because it's cost effective and you don't need that many long man hours and months and different seasons of continuously monitoring, adding eDNA as the water or soil that we're talking, that Nature Metrics provide those kind of kits, but also eDNA as spraint or scat or fecal, any animal that you're studying. From that, you can really do a population assessment and make sure that this population is going to continue doing the regeneration, whether we're speaking about the animals LRI has started working with or any animals in your site or country. You always have to combine both flora and fauna and think long-term and not just short-term. So the next generation of the actual local communities can benefit from the services, the forest, the rangeland, the riparian habitat, whatever habitat context you're speaking of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joelle and Samara, for this answer. I think we have one question from Sarah Samran. How can rural communities get involved in protecting their biodiversity? So I am not sure if Joelle and Samara, you want to take on that question. I know that you work a lot with the rural communities also.
Yes. So actually, it is very important to involve the community in any conservation process because, for example, I'm going to give the example of a region in Lebanon. It's called Anjar. We have created an Anjar Eco Park, which is helping the local community to conserve the forest. So we have created, like, within this forest, a park that has, like, how do we say, an economical asset for the community. So communities are benefiting economically from the park, so they are conserving their forest. So whenever you're creating, like, an incentive for the community, so it's you cannot imagine how great they will be in protecting and conserving their forests or the habitat or the ecosystem or whatever, you know. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Joelle. And I saw that Dr. Hamid, you had your hand raised. Not sure if you had any comment or question you wanted to ask.
Yes, please, Kamran. Thank you. And it's a sort of a comment and a reaction to one of the questions. A comment is that I'm really very impressed by this, and you know, my knowledge and about Larry is that you are very active in reforestation activities, and I didn't know that. I mean, Larry expertise goes beyond that to biodiversity and assessing fauna, flora in different contexts, and that's it's very good to see that we have NGOs that have a sort of a wide skill mix of expertise, and that's really something that we should encourage in our region. I mean, Larry is a bright example of this, and we look forward to see more NGOs with more skill mix in different areas, because I thought you are only in afforestation and reforestation. That's my first knowing. Well, coming back to the question of a linkage between the biodiversity and ecosystem restoration, if we are to, I mean, when you look to all the narrative in under the UN decade of ecosystem restoration, that we are targeting to restore ecosystems everywhere and anywhere and any kind of ecosystems. And I think we are still far. We need colleagues to bring to us also the dimension of the marine ecosystem. Now we are all focusing on terrestrial ecosystems, and then this is where with our knowledge, most of our knowledge lies. But we would like also to see the marine ecosystem, and part of this is definitely the biodiversity. Biodiversity in terrestrial ecosystem, biodiversity in marine ecosystem. This is part of the whole ecosystem, and for the ecosystem to function, I mean, we need to function properly as it used to be. We need to restore every single elements of that ecosystem. I mean, and to make sure that all the interaction between all species is well established to the benefits and to give us all the expected ecosystem services that we are looking for. And from that angle, I think biodiversity is critical and key, because, I mean, we cannot, for instance, just take one example of the insects, for instance, in pollination, their role in pollination of crops, their role in different things. So that's why studying and assessing by the fauna and flora of the country, and try to find out where we are standing, identifying those are in danger, trying to restore the one extinct and to protect the endangered one, because in the ecosystem we talk about three levels of actions. One is protect, halt, and then reverse. We have already a degraded ecosystem. We want to reverse them, bringing them back to production cycle, to function, to provide us with ecosystem services. So with this, I think that's why biodiversity is very critical. It is a critical element in any restoration, being it in terrestrial land or in marine ecosystem. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid. This is a very important intervention, and thank you very much for this very important intervention and comments. And you are 100% correct. We need to be focusing on all the different ecosystems, and just think on a more regional level and see why biodiversity assessment is important in ecological restoration. Thank you very much. And I know we have a couple more questions, and Dr. Abdel Menhem, you have your hand raised, so we will hear from you, and then we have two questions in the Q&A and one question in the chat box that we will answer, and then we can take every other questions, we can reply to them by email. Dr. Abdel Menhem, please.
Yeah, I will be very short because I want to give the floor to the others who ask questions. This webinar is for them, so we should give them more time. I just wanted to add also a compliment, as Hamid said. It was a very amazing presentation. So thank you, Joel and Samara, for the great presentation. It was really eye-opener and very informative. And what I found very interesting, maybe this will be also in the next webinar, that we should really, consider that in the next webinar is the technology part. Both Joel and Samara, they mentioned some technology. They mentioned the footprint. They mentioned the eDNA. All these technologies. I think this is really a great element that we need to highlight whenever we make any webinar. So I think this is very important. And thank you, Carlo, for the great moderation as well. So back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have one question. I think some people were asking about a contact email. So I just put in the chat box the contact email to reach us, so we can include all your case studies from different countries. And there's one question, if I can get this correct. Could you please elaborate? And it is a question from Usama. Could you please elaborate on the present level of contribution by the Arab civil society in biodiversity assessment studies within the local context? My previous question is mainly related to NGOs' contributions to biodiversity assessment. Thank you. So I am not sure who would volunteer to answer this question about the contribution of the Arab civil society. And if we do not have answers, we will look more into this. And if you could, Usama, elaborate more on the work of the Arab civil society on biodiversity assessment, this would also be very helpful for us. And we can even include them as a case study later on and share with everyone. And maybe it will be very helpful for biodiversity assessment in the region. And then I will move to another question from Rawia El-Dabi. Would it be possible to give a brief about the importance of these species for the ecosystem equilibrium? I mean, what is their role and how would it affect us negatively should we lose these species? And I think Samara is on for that question. Please go ahead.
Thank you again for that question. So I'm just going to give one example, 1.5 examples right now. For example, why we started picking our animals that we mentioned in this presentation, right? So for otters, they are keystone species. Keystone species means without this species, the whole ecosystem collapses. There will be more unhealthy fish. Then there won't be controlling the invertebrates as well, and then people won't be able to fish and all of that. So just the generic things. But in Lebanon, if you've come to Lebanon, all our rivers that are perennial rivers are destroyed. They are unhealthy. There's barely any form of diversity of flora even. It's mainly just asab. Well, what's asab? Sorry, I forgot the name of the...
I think it's Phragmites, L'Asab on the riparian, yeah. Phragmites.
Exactly. So that species is only thriving, and then the whole other diversity of flora is gone. There's not even any kind of fish for anyone to fish. Any people that you talk of the local communities, even the older generation, they're like, yes, when I was a kid, we used to do this, we used to do that. This was our livelihood. Now we can't because the fish that is still available is not edible. They are unhealthy, so on and so forth. But the place that otters still exist in Nahr al-Kabir is truly a different kind of beautiful riparian habitat that is healthy. We did even water assessments. The water is actually even cleaner than any other river in Lebanon. The vegetation, the diversity of the vegetation is breathtaking visually. So even for local communities' mental health, and even just living nearby, they have that cleaner and more greener areas. The fishermen are benefiting perfectly. They don't even overfish. There's only one section of the river. They just do unsustainable fishing with electrical nets, which they ended up complaining that they're having less and less fish. It's like, because you're using that method within this section of the river, fish are way moving and you're killing all the other fauna that's within this area, and otters don't even come to this area anymore because of the electrocution. So it's like right now, scientifically wise, we are proving the difference, but visually in this country, as an example, you actually can visually see the difference of the two different places where this keystone species is present and where the keystone species is not present, and the whole riparian habitat is just collapsed and not useful for anybody. And yeah, just I hope that answered. If it didn't, I can move to the bats example. But I hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samara, and I'm sure we will be having more questions. And I apologize, I have missed the hand raise from the focal point for Sudan. I think it's under the name of Galaxy A71. So please, I am not sure if we can give him the floor or unmute. Hiba, I think if we can try to.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I have no question, but I have some comments on you indicate and for ecosystem restoration. First of all, thank you for all informative presentation. It is very informative. My comments here, I would like to add something about the biodiversity related convention in relation to the ecosystem restoration. I think it is a very important for us, because if we look for the other biodiversity related convention, it is a backbone for the restoration of the ecosystem itself. Also, I think if we look for the endangered species in your assessment, and the reassessment of the biodiversity, I think it is more benefit for all if we look for the IUCN list. So many Arab countries, it is out of this list. That means it is so many neglection of the assessment of the endangered species. Of that, we have can have indicators for what mean by the endangered or the threatened species. All our speech here, it is undescriptive, it is not evidence-based. This is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I am really sorry for, I think we have passed our 1 hour time. And is it okay? Do we have one more? We have one more comment and question from Jamil, and other questions we will answer them if possible through email. And I do apologize for my Arabic. I don't know, Joël, can you see the Q&A box?
Yes.
There's one. If you can read that question, and if you or Samara or anyone from the panelists will be able to answer it. Thank you.
Yes. So Jamal is asking, هل توجد مؤشرات لتقييم توازن المنظومة الإيكولوجية من خلال تقييم التنوع البيولوجي? So should I answer in Arabic or English?
We have interpretation, so feel free to choose any language you want.
Yes, actually, Jamal, there is an indicator that I talked about in my presentation. It's called the IBP, the Index for Potential Biodiversity. So this index was developed by French people. So you could, whenever you're in, for example, a forest, you could know if there is a potential, an equilibrium in this forest, and if there is a potential to introduce new species or not. So this index is in French because it's developed by French people. So you can email us about it, and we could send you the detail of this index. I mean, how you could fill it on the field, and I can explain more to you about it.
Thank you, Joël. And again, the email is shared on the chat box, and feel free, Jamel, to share any question and comments also with Samara and Joël. I know we are out of time, so unfortunately we will have to stop here. But also there are some comments and questions if at the end of the series of webinars we will be having any certificate, and this will be also discussed with UNEP and FAO. But please feel free and please do join us for our later webinars, because we will be sharing many more new information and projects. And do not forget to send us any case studies that you want to share from your country or your projects, and we will add them to the correspondent webinars. Before we end this, I wanted to see if anyone from the panelists had any last comments, question, observation. Feel free. I guess not. So again, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you in our next webinar with more information to share. Thank you for joining. Have a great day.